In a single heartbeat of time, civilizations rise and fall, kings conquer, and discoveries change the world forever. Around 300,000 years ago, in the vast and varied landscapes of Africa, the first members of our species, Homo sapiens, began to take shape. Their emergence marked a quiet but profound turning point in the history of life on Earth. These early humans were physically similar to us, with the same upright posture, dexterous hands, and a growing capacity for complex thought. Yet their world was vastly different, untamed, often hostile, and brimming with both opportunities and dangers that would shape the trajectory of human evolution. The African savannas, forests, and river valleys provided a mosaic of habitats, rich in plants and animals, but survival was far from guaranteed. Predators lurked, the climate fluctuated unpredictably, and resources could be scarce. To endure, early Homo sapiens had to adapt, innovate, and collaborate in ways no other species had before. Life in these early societies was defined by movement. Small, mobile bands of hunter-gatherers roamed the land in search of food. They hunted antelopes, wild boar, and other game, sometimes risking dangerous encounters with larger predators. Gathering plant foods, roots, berries, nuts, and tubers was equally vital, a task that demanded knowledge of seasons, plants' edibility, and the cycles of the environment. These communities were not large. Numbers were kept small to ensure resources could support everyone. Yet within these groups, a remarkable social cohesion began to emerge. Early humans depended on each other not just for the physical act of hunting or gathering, but for the sharing of knowledge: where to find water during a dry spell, how to track prey, or how to avoid the many hazards of the natural world. Innovation became the key to survival. Early Homo sapiens fashioned tools from stone, bone, and wood, a skill that gradually became more sophisticated over time. Simple, sharp flakes and hand axes allowed them to butcher meat efficiently, dig for tubers, or process hives into clothing and shelter materials. Mastery over fire transformed daily life in profound ways. Fire offered warmth during the chilly nights, protection from predators, and a new method for cooking food, which made it more digestible and nutritionally rich. The control of fire also extended social interactions into the night, creating spaces for storytelling, planning, and teaching, early forms of cultural transmission that would define humanity. Eventually, the curiosity and adaptability of Homo sapiens propelled them beyond Africa. Migratory movements, sometimes across harsh deserts and along coastlines, brought early humans into the Middle East, Europe, and Asia. These migrations were not always linear or permanent, but they carried the seeds of human diversity across continents. Each new environment demanded fresh strategies, new tools, new hunting techniques, and new ways to cope with unfamiliar climates. In these journeys, humans encountered other hominin species, like Neanderthals in Europe and Denisovans in Asia. Some interactions were violent, but others left traces of exchange, genetic, technological, and cultural, hinting at a complex web of early human relationships. Language emerged as a transformative force in these societies. While the precise timeline remains uncertain, it is evident that the capacity for complex communication allowed humans to coordinate hunts, transmit knowledge, and forge stronger social bonds. Language created shared understanding, enabling abstract thought and planning that surpassed the immediacy of survival instincts. It allowed humans to speak of things not immediately present, future dangers, distant resources, or the unseen world of spirits and ancestors. This capacity for symbolic thought laid the groundwork for ritual, myth, and the earliest forms of culture. The creative impulse soon found expression in art. Archaeological discoveries reveal that tens of thousands of years ago, humans painted on cave walls, carved figurines, and adorned themselves with beads and pigments. These early artworks were not mere decoration. They reflected a consciousness capable of imagination, memory, and reflection. Painting animals on walls, crafting sculptures, or making personal ornaments may have served multiple purposes: communicating stories, asserting group identity, or invoking spiritual protection. Art was intertwined with the emergence of ritual, structured practices that gave meaning to life's uncertainties. Burials, often accompanied by grave goods, indicate that early humans contemplated mortality, social roles, and possibly an afterlife. These rituals were not universal, but they reveal a deepening awareness of the self and the world, a defining feature of our species. Survival challenges remained ever present. Early humans faced environmental upheavals, ice ages, shifting deserts, and rising seas that demanded constant adaptation. Diseases, injuries, and scarcity tested the resilience of each group. Yet the collective intelligence, innovation, and social cooperation of Homo sapiens allowed them not only to survive, but to thrive. The strategies developed in these early epochs, the sharing of resources, the use of tools and fire, the creation of language and ritual, formed the foundation upon which later civilizations would build. By the time Homo sapiens had spread across the globe, they had already undergone a profound transformation. They were not merely biological beings struggling for survival. They had become creatures of thought, creativity, and culture. Their tools, art, and stories bore witness to minds capable of abstract reasoning, of imagining worlds beyond immediate experience. Every painted cave wall, every carved figurine, every shared story or ritual was a testament to the dawn of humanity, the point at which humans became not just inhabitants of the world, but shapers of it. In retrospect, the emergence of Homo sapiens in Africa was not a sudden revolution, but a gradual accumulation of adaptations, insights, and inventions. It was a story of persistence and ingenuity, of social bonds and shared knowledge, of curiosity meeting opportunity in the vast African landscapes. From the earliest hunter-gatherer bands to the migrants crossing continents, from the first fire lit at dusk to the pigments marking cave walls, the dawn of humanity was a tapestry woven of survival, creativity, and consciousness. The legacy of these first humans is not only in our biology, but in our capacity for culture, for imagination, and for the endless pursuit of understanding the world and our place within it. Around 10,000 years ago, a profound transformation began to unfold across the Fertile Crescent, the river valleys of Mesopotamia, the Nile, and beyond. Human societies that had spent tens of thousands of years as mobile hunter-gatherers were gradually making a remarkable shift. The transition from roaming the landscape in search of sustenance to deliberately cultivating it. This era, known as the Agricultural Revolution, would lay the foundation for civilization itself, altering not just how humans lived, but how they thought, organized themselves, and understood the world. Before agriculture, humans relied on hunting wild animals and gathering seasonal plants. Their movements were dictated by the rhythms of nature, following herds, tracking migrations, and harvesting what the environment provided. This way of life demanded intimate knowledge of the land, but it also imposed limits on population growth and social complexity. Small, mobile groups could only sustain themselves in regions where resources were abundant, and scarcity or environmental changes could force them to relocate. Yet in several regions across the world, humans began to experiment with the domestication of plants and animals, gradually tipping the balance in their favor. The domestication of plants was a slow but revolutionary process. Early humans observed which wild grains, legumes, and tubers yielded the best harvests, and they began to sow seeds intentionally. Over generations, selective cultivation produced crops that were larger, more reliable, and easier to harvest. Wheat, barley, lentils, peas, and flax were among the first plants to be tamed in the Fertile Crescent, while in East Asia, rice and millet were cultivated, and in the Americas, maize, beans, and squash became staples. Parallel to this, animals such as goats, sheep, cattle, and pigs were domesticated for meat, milk, and labor. The ability to breed animals for specific traits not only ensured a more predictable food supply, but also provided secondary resources: wool for clothing, hides for shelter, and dung for fertilizer and fuel. This shift from foraging to farming allowed humans to remain in one place for extended periods, eventually giving rise to permanent settlements. Some of the earliest known communities, such as Jericho in the Levant, appeared as early as 9000 BCE. Here, inhabitants constructed stone foundations, walls, and towers, suggesting a degree of communal organization and planning that had been unnecessary for nomadic life. Similarly, Çatalhöyük in Anatolia, a sprawling settlement of several thousand people, revealed densely packed houses, decorated walls, and shared communal spaces. These early villages were far more than simple collections of dwellings. They were hubs of social, economic, and cultural life, where humans experimented with new forms of living, working, and belonging. With permanent settlements came profound changes in social organization. Populations grew, and the need for coordination in food production, water management, and defense led to emerging hierarchies. Some individuals or families gained greater control over land, resources, and surplus food, laying the groundwork for inequality and social stratification. Craft specialization began to emerge as well. Some people focused on pottery, weaving, or tool making, while others worked the fields or tended livestock. These divisions of labor fostered new skills and technologies, and they also encouraged trade, both within and between settlements. Surpluses of grain, livestock, or crafted goods could be exchanged for resources not locally available, creating early trade networks that connected distant communities. Religion and ritual took on new significance during this period. In a world where humans had begun to alter the land and control food production, the forces of nature, sun, rain, fertility of the soil, and the cycles of life and death were central to survival. Shrines, figurines, and symbolic artifacts found in settlements like Çatalhöyük suggest a deep spiritual life intertwined with agriculture. Fertility goddesses, animal motifs, and sacred spaces indicate that early humans sought to understand, appease, and harness the powers they believed controlled their harvests and fortunes. Rituals, ceremonies, and communal gatherings reinforced social cohesion and provided a framework for shared beliefs, helping to bind the growing populations together. The consequences of the agricultural revolution were both immediate and long-lasting. With reliable food sources, human populations increased rapidly, and settlements expanded into towns and eventually cities. Farming allowed humans to store surplus food, reducing the constant uncertainty of hunter-gatherer life. Yet, it also introduced new vulnerabilities. Dependence on a limited number of crops made communities susceptible to disease, pests, or environmental fluctuations. Labor became more intensive, as plowing, planting, harvesting, and tending livestock required sustained effort, sometimes reducing the leisure and mobility that hunter-gatherers had enjoyed. Nonetheless, the benefits outweighed the risks, as agriculture enabled humans to manipulate their environment in unprecedented ways. Trade networks began to stretch across regions, connecting settlements separated by mountains, rivers, and deserts. Obsidian, flint, shells, and other materials traveled great distances, along with ideas, techniques, and cultural practices. Knowledge of irrigation, animal husbandry, and crop rotation spread, accelerating innovation. The establishment of permanent settlements also fostered record-keeping, early forms of accounting, and eventually writing, as communities sought to manage resources, agreements, and social obligations. In essence, the agricultural revolution did not merely provide sustenance, it laid the groundwork for complex societies, economic systems, and cultural development. The revolution was not uniform or simultaneous. It unfolded differently across regions, influenced by climate, geography, and available flora and fauna. Yet, despite these variations, the shift from nomadic hunting and gathering to settled agriculture represents one of the most transformative periods in human history. It reshaped the relationship between humans and nature, as people moved from being passive consumers of the environment to active shapers of it. Fields were cleared, seeds sown, and irrigation canals dug. Human hands increasingly controlled the fate of food and landscape. This mastery over the environment came with new challenges and responsibilities, yet it also unleashed creativity, cooperation, and a sense of possibility that had been unimaginable to earlier hunter-gatherers. As human societies grew from scattered farming villages into dense clusters of people, the foundations of the first civilizations began to emerge. Around river valleys, where water, fertile soil, and trade routes converged, humanity took its next great leap. The shift from small settlements to organized cities transformed not only how people lived, but how they thought about power, identity, technology, and the very nature of society. This rise of civilization unfolded across several regions, each developing unique cultures, innovations, and legacies that still echo through the modern world. In the lands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, Mesopotamia became the cradle of the earliest cities. Here, around 3500 BCE, the Sumerians constructed bustling urban centers such as Uruk and Ur, places filled with temple complexes, administrative buildings, workshops, and crowded neighborhoods. These early cities were masterpieces of human coordination. Engineered irrigation canals fed their grain fields, while ziggurats rose into the sky, towering platforms that connected the earthly realm with the divine. The Sumerians developed systems to organize labor, manage trade, and enforce laws, laying the framework for structured urban life. But perhaps their most enduring invention was writing. Cuneiform, first etched into clay tablets as simple pictographs to record grain and taxes, evolved into a sophisticated writing system capable of capturing myths, laws, astronomy, and administrative records. Through writing, Mesopotamians preserved their thoughts across generations, creating a bridge between past and future that no earlier society had achieved. Their stories of gods, kings, and cosmic battles shaped much of the ancient world's imagination and remain among humanity's earliest recorded literature. Far to the west, another great civilization was rising along the life-giving banks of the Nile River. Ancient Egypt grew in harmony with the rhythm of the Nile's yearly flood, which replenished fields and sustained agriculture. This predictable cycle fostered stability, allowing small farming communities to gather under powerful leaders who would eventually become the pharaohs, rulers regarded not merely as kings, but as divine beings. The pharaoh's authority unified the land, enabling grand projects that required vast labor and coordination. Among these achievements were the pyramids, monumental stone structures built as eternal tombs for the pharaohs. The Great Pyramid of Giza, constructed during the Old Kingdom, stood as the tallest man-made structure on Earth for millennia. Its precision, scale, and alignment illustrate a mastery of engineering, mathematics, and centralized labor unseen elsewhere at the time. Egyptian civilization blended religion, art, and governance into a seamless worldview. Hieroglyphic writing filled tombs, temples, and papyrus scrolls with stories of gods, journeys of the soul, and the rituals necessary for the afterlife. This emphasis on order, eternity, and divine kingship gave Egypt a cultural identity so enduring that it lasted for more than 3,000 years. Across the mountains and deserts of modern-day Afghanistan and Pakistan, another remarkable civilization flourished along the Indus River. Known today as the Indus Valley or Harappan civilization, it developed one of the most advanced urban systems of the ancient world. Cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro were laid out with astonishing precision. Straight streets intersecting at right angles, standardized bricks used for construction, and sophisticated drainage systems that surpassed many later civilizations. Public baths, granaries, and marketplaces reveal a society that valued cleanliness, organization, and economic coordination. Yet despite their impressive achievements, the people of the Indus Valley remain mysterious. Their script, carved on seals and pottery, has never been deciphered, leaving much of their political structure and religious life unknown. Archaeological evidence suggests they engaged in long-distance trade with Mesopotamia and possibly Egypt, exchanging metals, gemstones, and crafted goods. Then, around 1900 BCE, their cities began to decline. Whether due to climate change, shifting river patterns, disease, or gradual economic breakdown, the civilization faded without leaving clear historical records, becoming one of history's great enigmas. In East Asia, along the Yellow River, early Chinese civilizations were taking shape with their own distinct identity. The Shang dynasty, emerging around 1600 BCE, built fortified cities, ruled through powerful warrior aristocracies, and developed bronze metallurgy to a high degree of skill. The Shang kings communicated with the gods through oracle bone inscriptions, questions carved into bones or shells, and interpreted through cracks formed by heat. These inscriptions are among the earliest examples of Chinese writing and reveal a society deeply concerned with ritual, divination, and the cosmic order. The Shang were also known for elaborate tombs filled with jade, bronze vessels, chariots, and even human sacrifices, reflecting a belief in a strong connection between the living and their ancestors. Following the Shang, the Zhou dynasty expanded and refined these traditions. They introduced the concept of the mandate of heaven, a powerful political and moral philosophy that stated rulers governed with divine approval only as long as they ruled justly. If a king became tyrannical or incompetent, the heavens could withdraw their mandate, justifying rebellion and the rise of a new ruler. This idea shaped Chinese political thought for more than 2,000 years. Under the Zhou, agricultural innovations, iron tools, and early forms of bureaucracy spread across the region. Family lineage, loyalty, and moral responsibility became core values, forming the cultural roots from which Confucianism and Taoism would later grow. Across all these civilizations, Mesopotamian, Egyptian, Indus, and early Chinese, certain shared patterns began to emerge. Cities grew as centers of political power, religious authority, and economic activity. Writing systems expanded human memory, allowing knowledge to accumulate across centuries. Trade networks linked far-flung communities, spreading goods, technologies, and ideas. Governments developed to manage irrigation, defend territories, collect taxes, and organize labor. Social hierarchies solidified. Pause, with elites, priests, artisans, and farmers forming distinct roles within society. Religion played a central role everywhere, shaping moral values, political legitimacy, and the sense of humanity's place in the universe. These first civilizations did not rise in isolation, nor did they follow identical paths, yet each represented a monumental shift in human existence. The transformation from small farming communities into complex societies capable of monumental architecture, scientific innovation, philosophical thought, and cultural identity. They laid the foundations for everything that would follow: empires, trade routes, religions, technologies, and the recorded history of humanity. The story of civilization is, in many ways, the story of how humans learned to build beyond the individual, to create systems, cities, and cultures that would endure long after their creators were gone. As the earliest civilizations matured, the ancient world entered a new and transformative chapter, an age defined by conquest, ambition, and the rise of powerful empires that reshaped the political and cultural landscape of humanity. City-states that had once existed in isolation now expanded into vast imperial systems, uniting diverse peoples under centralized rule. This era marked the first time in history that leaders sought not only to govern their own lands, but to bring entire regions under their command. In Mesopotamia, this era began with the rise of the Akkadian Empire under Sargon the Great, around 2334 BCE. Sargon forged the world's first true empire by uniting the independent Sumerian city-states through both diplomacy and military might. His rule stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean, creating a multi-ethnic, multilingual realm governed by administrators loyal to the king. The Akkadians standardized weights, measures, and record-keeping, transforming earlier Sumerian cultural achievements into tools of imperial control. Though the empire eventually fell to internal rebellions and foreign invasions, it set the template for every empire that followed. Centuries later, the Babylonians rose to prominence, turning the city of Babylon into one of the great capitals of the ancient world. Under Hammurabi, the empire reached new heights, and it was during his rule that one of history's earliest written legal codes was created. Hammurabi's code established principles of justice, rights, and responsibilities, carved into stone so they would apply equally across the kingdom. Babylon also became a center of astronomy, mathematics, and literature, inheriting Sumerian traditions while shaping its own identity. Later, during the Neo-Babylonian period, mighty rulers such as Nebuchadnezzar II rebuilt the city into a spectacular metropolis, adorned with monumental gates, towering ziggurats, and the legendary Hanging Gardens. To the north, the Assyrians built an empire renowned for its military innovation, discipline, and power. With iron weapons, cavalry units, and siege engines, the Assyrian army became one of the most formidable fighting forces of the ancient world. Their capital cities, Nineveh, Ashur, and Nimrud, were filled with grand palaces decorated with reliefs depicting battles, hunts, and rituals. While feared for their ruthlessness, the Assyrians also excelled in administration, building roads, postal systems, and libraries, including the famous Library of Ashurbanipal, which preserved thousands of clay tablets from older civilizations. Their empire, though vast, eventually fractured under the strain of rebellions and external attacks, paving the way for new powers to rise. Among these new powers, none shined brighter than Persia under the leadership of Cyrus the Great. In the mid-6th century BCE, Cyrus forged the Achaemenid Empire. the largest the ancient world had ever seen, stretching from Egypt and Anatolia to the Indus Valley. Unlike earlier conquerors, Cyrus embraced a policy of tolerance, allowing conquered peoples to keep their customs, religions, and local authorities. This approach earned him admiration across his vast realm, and even in foreign scriptures, he was remembered as a liberator rather than a tyrant. The Persians built a network of royal roads, postal stations, and administrative districts known as satrapies, each governed by officials responsible directly to the king. Under Darius I and Xerxes, the empire reached even greater heights, becoming a sophisticated and multicultural world power. While Persia ruled across continents, another remarkable civilization was flourishing on the mountainous shores of the Aegean Sea. The Greek world was not an empire, but a tapestry of independent city-states, each with its own government, culture, and identity. Among them, Athens stood as a beacon of intellectual and political innovation. From this city emerged democracy, a system in which free male citizens debated laws, voted on policies, and shaped the direction of their community. Athens became a center of philosophy, art, and literature, hosting towering figures such as Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Their ideas about ethics, politics, and the nature of reality would influence world thought for millennia. In contrast, Sparta built a society centered on military discipline, communal values, and rigorous training. Spartan warriors were feared across Greece, and their strict lifestyle forged one of the most effective fighting forces of the ancient world. Rivalries between Athens and Sparta culminated in the Peloponnesian War, a decades-long conflict that weakened both powers and left Greece vulnerable to outside influence. That outside influence arrived in the form of Macedon, a kingdom north of Greece that rose under Philip II and reached its zenith under his son, Alexander the Great. Alexander inherited his father's vision of uniting the Greek world, but his ambitions reached far beyond. After defeating Persia's mightiest armies, he embarked on a breathtaking campaign that carried him from Egypt to the heart of India. In just over a decade, Alexander created one of the largest empires in history, driven by brilliant strategy, bold leadership, and an unquenchable desire for exploration. Though Alexander died young, his conquests transformed the ancient world. Greek culture blended with Persian, Egyptian, and Asian traditions in what became known as the Hellenistic era. Cities such as Alexandria, Antioch, and Pergamon flourished as centers of learning, trade, and science. Scholars studied mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. Traders connected continents. Artists created new styles that fused East and West. It was a world of shared ideas, diverse cultures, and expanding horizons, an echo of the globalized world to come. The Age of Empires reshaped human history, turning local cultures into vast networks of power and influence, and creating the political and cultural frameworks that would guide civilizations for centuries. Through conquest, innovation, and the blending of diverse peoples, these ancient empires laid the groundwork for the interconnected world we know today. The rise of Rome began not with emperors or monumental architecture, but with a republic built on laws, debate, and an unwavering belief in duty. In the early centuries of its existence, Rome was just one of many city-states in the Italian peninsula, yet it possessed a political system unlike any other in the Mediterranean. Its citizens, divided into patricians and plebeians, placed immense value on shared power and civic responsibility. The Roman Republic relied on elected magistrates, a system of checks and balances, and above all, the Senate, a body of experienced statesmen whose debates shaped laws, foreign policy, and military strategy. While far from democratic in the modern sense, this structure fostered stability and adaptability. As Rome expanded its influence across Italy, its laws, such as the 12 Tables, formed the backbone of legal systems that would inspire future civilizations. What made Rome exceptional was its ability to absorb conquered peoples. Instead of ruling with distant tyranny, Rome extended partial or full citizenship to allies, linking them to its destiny. Roads, colonies, and military alliances knitted Italy into a unified framework under Roman leadership. As its armies grew more experienced, the Republic's ambitions spread beyond the peninsula, drawing it into conflict with the dominant naval and commercial power of the Western Mediterranean, Carthage. The struggle between Rome and Carthage, known as the Punic Wars, became one of the most defining series of conflicts in ancient history. The First Punic War centered on Sicily, where Rome transformed itself into a naval power almost overnight. But it was the Second Punic War that seared itself into memory, largely due to one man, Hannibal Barca. The Carthaginian general achieved what few thought possible. He marched a massive army, complete with war elephants, across the Alps and into Italy. Hannibal's campaign was a masterclass in strategy. At battles like Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and especially Cannae, he annihilated Roman armies, inflicting losses so devastating that many believed the Republic would not survive. Yet Rome's resilience proved unmatched. Instead of surrendering, Roman commanders adopted new strategies, avoiding direct engagement with Hannibal while striking Carthaginian holdings elsewhere. The young general Scipio Africanus eventually carried the war into North Africa, forcing Hannibal to return and face him at the Battle of Zama. Rome emerged victorious, and Carthage was reduced to a shadow of its former self. By the end of the Third Punic War, Carthage was destroyed completely. Salt, fire, and ruins symbolize the end of Rome's greatest rival. Having won control of the Western Mediterranean, Rome turned eastward. Greece, Macedonia, and the Hellenistic kingdoms became battlegrounds for influence. Riches, slaves, knowledge, and culture poured into Rome, transforming a once humble republic into a dominant imperial powerhouse. However, these expansions brought not just wealth, but deep internal tensions. Generals gained personal armies, political factions clashed violently, social inequality widened. Figures like Marius and Sulla, Pompey and Crassus, Cicero and Cato all struggled over the Republic's future. Amid the chaos rose Julius Caesar, a brilliant general whose conquest of Gaul made him a hero to soldiers and a threat to rivals. His crossing of the Rubicon sparked civil war, and though Caesar emerged victorious, his assassination was meant to restore the Republic. Instead, it plunged Rome into further conflict. It was Caesar's adopted son, Octavian, later known as Augustus, who finally ended the cycle of civil wars. Through political genius, military strength, and careful propaganda, he defeated Mark Antony and Cleopatra, becoming Rome's uncontested ruler. Yet Augustus understood the Roman psyche. He presented himself not as a king, but as first citizen, preserving the outward appearance of republican institutions while holding ultimate authority. With him, the Roman Empire began. Under Augustus, the Mediterranean entered a period of unprecedented peace and prosperity known as the Pax Romana. For nearly 2 centuries, the empire flourished. Roads stretched from Britain to Syria, allowing soldiers, merchants, and ideas to move with unprecedented speed. Aqueducts carried fresh water into crowded cities. Arches, domes, and concrete enabled architecture on a monumental scale. Amphitheaters like the Colosseum, temples like the Pantheon, and bathhouses in every major city became symbols of Roman engineering brilliance. Law courts upheld justice across provinces, ensuring order in an empire of millions. Latin spread as a unifying language, while Greek culture, philosophy, art, literature merged with Roman traditions to create a vibrant shared identity. Culturally, Rome was a mosaic of peoples and beliefs. Egyptians, Syrians, Gauls, Iberians, Jews, Greeks, and many others lived within its borders, worshipping diverse gods. This religious flexibility defined Rome for centuries until a small, unconventional sect emerged from Judea, spreading teachings that challenged the traditional order. Christianity began with followers of Jesus of Nazareth, whose message of love, forgiveness, and spiritual equality resonated deeply among the poor, enslaved, and marginalized. Roman authorities initially viewed it with suspicion. Refusal to worship the emperor or Roman gods brought persecution. Yet Christianity's appeal grew rapidly. Its organizational structure, moral teachings, and sense of community thrived in cities where many people felt spiritually adrift. By the 3rd century, Christians were found in every corner of the empire. The turning point came with Emperor Constantine, who legalized Christianity and later embraced it himself. Over time, it shifted from a persecuted minority to the empire's dominant faith. Churches rose where temples once stood. Bishops became political as well as religious leaders, and Christian ideals began shaping Roman laws and culture. The empire that once worshipped Jupiter, Mars, and Venus now upheld a monotheistic faith that preached humility and salvation. As Christianity flourished, Rome itself evolved. The western and eastern halves of the empire developed distinct identities. Pressures from migrating tribes mounted, and political stability waned. But the legacy of Rome, its laws, roads, architecture, language, philosophy, and religious transformation endured far beyond the empire's fall. The Mediterranean world, forever shaped by Roman ambition and ingenuity, became the foundation upon which medieval and modern societies would rise. Rome's story was one of resilience, adaptation, and vision. A civilization that began as a modest republic, conquered a vast world, reshaped global culture, and left behind ideas that continue to guide humanity today. The story of the classical East unfolds across vast lands where kingdoms rose, philosophy spread, and trade routes stitched together cultures that had never before touched. In India, China, Japan, and Korea, ancient societies were shaping ideas and institutions that would influence the world for millennia. Their achievements in governance, mathematics, spirituality, and diplomacy created a powerful counterbalance to the civilizations growing in the West. And together they formed the twin cradles of human development. In the Indian subcontinent, the Maurya Empire emerged as one of the first great political powers. Around the late 4th century BCE, Chandragupta Maurya forged a unified state from a patchwork of kingdoms, building a realm that stretched across most of the subcontinent. His administration was supported by an elaborate bureaucracy, spy networks, tax systems, and provincial governors who ensured that even distant regions remained loyal to the imperial center. The capital at Pataliputra was a cosmopolitan city buzzing with traders, scholars, diplomats, and travelers arriving from Persia, Central Asia, and even the far-off Greek world. Under Ashoka, the most celebrated Mauryan ruler, this empire transformed from a conqueror state into a moral and spiritual beacon. Horrified by the devastation of the Kalinga War, Ashoka embraced Buddhism, spreading its teachings through carved pillars, rock edicts, and a vast missionary network that reached as far as Sri Lanka and Central Asia. His reign not only stabilized the empire, but helped Buddhism blossom into a global religion. Centuries later, after a period of fragmentation, northern India witnessed another golden era under the Gupta Empire. Though smaller than the Mauryan realm, the Gupta dynasty presided over an age of extraordinary creativity and intellectual progress. Classical Sanskrit literature flourished, with poets, playwrights, and philosophers producing works that became foundational texts of Indian culture. In mathematics, Gupta-era scholars made pioneering advancements. Concepts like zero, the decimal system, and important algebraic methods took shape, leaving a legacy that would travel across the world. This period also saw the refinement of Hinduism into a more unified tradition, the rise of magnificent temple architecture, and trade networks that connected India to Southeast Asia, stimulating cultural exchange and maritime prosperity. The Gupta age became known as India's classical period, a time when arts, science, and religion developed in harmonious balance. Far to the northeast, China experienced its own powerful transformations. After the chaos of the Warring States period, the Qin dynasty emerged in 221 BCE with a singular mission: unification at any cost. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, standardized writing, currency, weights, and measures across his new empire, and began the monumental task of connecting defensive walls into what would become the Great Wall of China. His government was strict, centralized, and relentless, enforcing legalist principles that prioritized order and authority. Although the Qin dynasty was short-lived, its accomplishments set the stage for one of the greatest dynasties in Chinese history. The Han dynasty succeeded the Qin and embraced a more balanced approach rooted in Confucian philosophy. Confucian scholars began shaping state policies, emphasizing moral governance, social harmony, and merit-based bureaucracy. The Han created one of the world's first professional civil service systems, selecting officials through examinations and scholarly training. This innovation provided administrative stability for centuries and influenced governance throughout East Asia. Under the Han, China expanded its borders, developed iron technology, and achieved remarkable progress in astronomy, medicine, and historical writing. It was also during this era that China opened long-distance trade routes connecting it to Central Asia and eventually to the Mediterranean world. These trade networks, later known as the Silk Road, became arteries of cultural exchange, carrying silk, spices, glass, and precious metals across deserts and mountains. More importantly, they allowed ideas, religions, technologies, and artistic styles to travel vast distances. From China, silk and lacquerware dazzled foreign markets. From India, Buddhism traveled northward, finding new homes in China, Korea, and Japan, where it mixed with local traditions and evolved in diverse forms. The Silk Road not only moved goods, but also helped create the first global tapestry of shared human experience. Across the sea, the early societies of Japan and Korea were also taking shape. In the Korean peninsula, tribes gradually formed centralized states such as Goguryeo, Baekje, and Silla. These kingdoms forged unique identities but were deeply influenced by Chinese writing, diplomacy, Buddhism, and Confucian government models. Trade and cultural exchange flowed constantly between Korea, China, and Japan, helping spark early state formation across the region. In Japan, the Yayoi and later the Kofun periods marked transitions toward agricultural societies, metallurgy, and political organization under powerful clan leaders. The early Japanese aristocracy adopted Chinese writing, court rituals, and governing structures, blending them with native traditions like Shintoism. This mix would eventually create one of the most distinct cultures in the ancient world. As Buddhism entered Japan from Korea, it transformed not only spirituality, but also art, architecture, and statecraft. contributing to the emergence of a centralized imperial identity. Across this vast region, from the Indian subcontinent to the islands of Japan, the classical East was marked by innovation, cultural flowering, and interconnectedness. Empires rose and fell, religions spread, philosophies matured, and trade routes tied people together in ways that would echo across centuries. The legacies of the Mauryas, Guptas, Qin, and Han, along with the early cultures of Korea and Japan, created foundations upon which much of Asian civilization, and indeed global civilization, would continue to build. The Middle Ages began with one of the most dramatic transformations in world history, the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. What had once been a unified Mediterranean world fragmented into countless tribes, kingdoms, and shifting alliances. Roads that had linked continents fell into disrepair, trade slowed, and cities shrank as people retreated to rural estates for safety. Yet out of this seeming darkness emerged the foundations of medieval Europe, a world shaped by new identities, fresh powers, and complex cultural blends. Germanic tribes such as the Franks, Visigoths, and Lombards settled into former Roman lands, adopting parts of Roman law, Latin culture, and Christianity while adding their own traditions. This fusion created early medieval kingdoms that would eventually evolve into modern European nations. During this period, the Catholic Church became the continent's most stable and powerful institution, preserving literacy, maintaining diplomatic ties, and guiding the spiritual lives of millions. Monasteries became centers of learning, where monks painstakingly copied ancient manuscripts that might otherwise have vanished forever. While the Western Roman world crumbled, the Eastern Roman Empire, known to history as the Byzantine Empire, remained a powerful and sophisticated civilization for nearly 1,000 more years. Its capital, Constantinople, stood as one of the richest and most strategically important cities on Earth. Protected by massive walls and located at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, it became a beacon of trade, faith, and culture. The Byzantines preserved the knowledge of ancient Greece and Rome, maintaining libraries full of classical texts and nurturing scholars who wrote commentaries on philosophy, medicine, mathematics, and law. Under Emperor Justinian, the empire sought to reclaim lost territories and produced one of its most enduring achievements: the Corpus Juris Civilis, a codification of Roman law that would later influence legal systems across Europe. Byzantine art, particularly its shimmering mosaics and domed churches, set aesthetic standards that spread throughout the Orthodox Christian world. Even as the empire battled invaders, from Persians to Slavs to crusaders, it remained a crucial link between the ancient and medieval ages, safeguarding knowledge that would one day help ignite the Renaissance. Meanwhile, in the deserts of Arabia, a new religious and political force emerged in the 7th century that would reshape the world: Islam. With the revelations received by the Prophet Muhammad, a faith was born that soon united the tribes of Arabia into a rapidly expanding community. Within a century of Muhammad's death, Islamic caliphates stretched from Spain to the Indus Valley, forming one of the largest empires in history. More importantly, the Islamic world became a vibrant center of learning, science, and trade. Cities such as Baghdad, Damascus, and Cordoba hosted scholars who made remarkable advances in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, chemistry, and geography. The translation movement in Baghdad's House of Wisdom preserved Greek philosophical texts and blended them with new discoveries from the Islamic world, India, and Persia. Algebra developed into a sophisticated discipline. Medical textbooks became global references, and astronomers mapped the heavens with unprecedented accuracy. Islamic merchants linked the Mediterranean to East Africa, India, and China, ensuring that goods, ideas, and technologies flowed across continents. The cultural brilliance of this era left an enduring mark on human civilization. Back in Europe, after centuries of instability, society gradually organized itself around a system known as feudalism. At the top stood kings who granted land to nobles, who in turn provided loyalty, soldiers, and resources. Below them were knights, armored warriors who trained for battle from childhood and embodied ideals of honor and chivalry. These knights served as the military backbone of medieval Europe, defending territories and enforcing local authority. Castles dotted the landscape, offering protection in times of war and acting as administrative centers for the surrounding lands. Life for ordinary people, especially peasants and serfs, was harsh. Most worked the fields from dawn to dusk, bound to the land they farmed, and relied on the protection of their lord in exchange for labor. Despite its inequalities, feudalism created a degree of stability that allowed agriculture to flourish and population to grow. Over time, towns began to revive, trade returned, and guilds of craftsmen formed, laying the economic foundations for later change. Yet medieval Europe was not an isolated world. Powerful forces from beyond its borders regularly shaped its destiny. Among the most feared and fascinating were the Vikings of Scandinavia, expert sailors who could navigate ocean waves as easily as shallow rivers. Beginning in the late 8th century, they launched raids across Britain, France, Spain, and even the Mediterranean. Monasteries, wealthy but lightly defended, became frequent targets. But the Vikings were more than raiders. They were explorers, traders, and settlers. They founded Dublin, colonized Iceland, reached Greenland, and even touched North America centuries before Columbus. In the East, Viking traders known as the Rus formed early states in what is now Russia and Ukraine, connecting the Baltic world to the Byzantine Empire. Even greater shocks came from the vast grasslands of Central Asia. Nomadic empires rose again and again, but none matched the scale and impact of the Mongols. In the 13th century, Genghis Khan forged a united Mongol nation and unleashed an unstoppable wave of conquests. His armies, disciplined, mobile, and devastatingly effective, created the largest contiguous land empire in history. The Mongols conquered China, Persia, and large parts of Russia, and even threatened Europe. Their reign was marked by destruction, but also by extraordinary cultural exchange. The Pax Mongolica, Mongol peace, opened the Silk Road wider than ever before, allowing merchants, diplomats, missionaries, and scholars to travel safely across Eurasia. Technologies such as papermaking and gunpowder moved westward, while artistic styles, foods, and ideas blended across continents. Although the Mongol Empire eventually fractured, its influence reshaped global history. The Middle Ages, far from being a stagnant or isolated period, was an era of transformation, connection, and creativity. The fall of Rome gave birth to new cultures in Europe. The Byzantines safeguarded ancient wisdom. The Islamic world ignited a scientific golden age. Feudalism structured society, and nomadic empires expanded horizons beyond anything previously imagined. This complex and dynamic era laid the groundwork for the Renaissance, the rise of nation-states, and the foundations of the modern world. The age of exploration did not emerge suddenly. It grew from centuries of curiosity, ambition, and cultural encounters that pushed Europeans to seek what lay beyond the horizon. One of the earliest sparks came from the Crusades, a series of religious wars beginning in the late 11th century that brought Europeans into direct contact with the wealth, knowledge, and sophistication of the Islamic world. Crusaders returning from the Middle East carried stories of bustling markets, exotic spices, fine textiles, and advanced scholarship. These glimpses into distant civilizations ignited a hunger for new goods and greater understanding. Although the Crusades themselves failed in their primary goals, they opened Europe's eyes to a world far richer and more varied than they had imagined. This curiosity grew alongside a desire for direct access to Asian luxury goods, pepper, cinnamon, silk, precious stones, without relying on middlemen who dominated the overland routes. As European kingdoms stabilized and their economies expanded, rulers and merchants began dreaming of alternate pathways to the east, especially sea routes that could bypass the rising power of the Ottoman Empire. The quest for new trade routes coincided with rapid advancements in navigation and shipbuilding. The development of the compass, the astrolabe, improved maps, and the caravel, an agile ship capable of long voyages, allowed sailors to push farther into the Atlantic than ever before. Portugal took the lead under Prince Henry the Navigator, who sponsored expeditions along the west coast of Africa. These ventures brought home gold, ivory, and knowledge of winds and currents that would later guide longer journeys. As sailors crept southward around the African coast, each new discovery seemed to promise that a sea route to India and the Spice Islands was tantalizingly close. Meanwhile, Spain watched these developments with both envy and determination, unwilling to let Portugal dominate the new maritime frontier. It was in this atmosphere of fierce competition and high ambition that Christopher Columbus approached the Spanish monarchs with a bold proposal: to reach Asia by sailing west across the Atlantic. His calculations were flawed, dramatically underestimating the size of the Earth. But his determination was irresistible. In 1492, backed by Ferdinand and Isabella, Columbus set sail and landed not in Asia, but in the Caribbean islands, an event that would transform world history. Columbus believed he had found the outskirts of Asia, but his voyages soon revealed that he had stumbled upon continents unknown to Europeans, Africans, and Asians. His discoveries triggered a wave of exploration as Spain, Portugal, and later England, France, and the Netherlands raced to chart this new world. While Columbus opened the door to the Americas, other explorers expanded Europe's reach even further. Vasco da Gama, sailing for Portugal, rounded the Cape of Good Hope and reached India in 1498, finally securing the long-sought maritime route to Asian spices. This accomplishment shattered the monopoly of overland traders and allowed Portugal to establish a network of fortified trading posts along the Indian Ocean rim. A few decades later, Ferdinand Magellan embarked on the most daring voyage of the era, an attempt to circumnavigate the globe. Although Magellan himself died in the Philippines, his expedition completed the journey, proving that the world was far larger and more interconnected than previously imagined. These feats not only altered global geography, but also shifted the balance of power, turning Europe into the hub of a rapidly expanding web of exploration and trade. The discovery of the Americas initiated one of the most profound transformations in human history: the colonization of vast lands inhabited by diverse and sophisticated societies. Spanish conquistadors arrived with steel weapons, horses, and gunpowder, technologies that Native American civilizations had never encountered. Diseases such as smallpox, measles, and influenza spread even faster than European armies, devastating millions and collapsing empires like the Aztec and Inca long before resistance could fully mobilize. In the Caribbean and mainland territories, Spain established a colonial system designed to extract wealth on an unprecedented scale. Gold and silver poured into Europe, fueling economies and funding new ambitions. But colonization was not simply a European story. It was a global exchange of life, culture, and ecological transformation. The Columbian Exchange, the transfer of plants, animals, diseases, and technologies between the Old and New worlds, reshaped diets, landscapes, and populations. From the Americas came crops like potatoes, maize, tomatoes, peanuts, cocoa, and tobacco, which revolutionized global agriculture and cuisine. Potatoes in particular boosted populations in Europe and Asia due to their high yields and nutritional value. In return, Europeans brought wheat, sugarcane, livestock, and Old World diseases that dramatically altered the demographic landscape of the Americas. The introduction of horses transformed the lives of many Native American tribes, enabling new forms of mobility and warfare across the Great Plains. The exchange was both creative and destructive, fostering growth in some regions while wiping out entire communities in others. As exploration and colonization unfolded, global trade networks expanded at breathtaking speed. Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas became linked by continuous flows of goods, people, and capital. The Atlantic slave trade emerged as a brutal pillar of this new economic system. Millions of Africans were captured, transported across the ocean under horrific conditions, and forced into labor on plantations producing sugar, cotton, coffee, and tobacco, commodities that fueled European wealth. These plantations became the engines of early global capitalism, generating profits that spurred investment, banking, and commercial growth across Europe. The expanding trade networks also gave rise to powerful joint stock companies such as the Dutch East India Company and the British East India Company. These corporations, backed by state power, controlled vast territories, maintained private armies, and monopolized trade in spices, textiles, and other valuable goods. Their success reflected a new economic philosophy emerging in Europe: the belief that wealth could be created through investment, innovation, and international commerce rather than simply acquired by conquest. This early form of capitalism began taking shape in bustling port cities like Amsterdam, Lisbon, and London, where merchants, bankers, and ship owners collaborated to finance risk and reap enormous rewards. By the end of the Age of Exploration, the world was irreversibly changed. Continents that had once developed in isolation were now bound together in a system of global interaction. Ideas, languages, religions, and technologies crossed oceans with increasing speed. European powers grew wealthier and more ambitious, setting the stage for colonial empires, scientific revolutions, and new political ideologies. Yet the age also left behind deep scars: diseases that decimated populations, forced migrations that reshaped societies, and economic inequalities that persist into the modern era. Still, the legacy of this transformative period is undeniable. It marked the moment when humanity, for better or worse, became a truly global species. The Renaissance began as a quiet stirring in the cities of Italy, a rediscovery of ancient wisdom that slowly transformed Europe's understanding of art, humanity, and the natural world. After centuries dominated by feudal life and religious authority, people began looking back to Greece and Rome for inspiration, finding in classical texts a celebration of human potential, beauty, and reason. This revival, known as humanism, encouraged scholars to question long-held assumptions and artists to explore new techniques that captured the richness of human emotion. Florence, Venice, and Rome became vibrant centers where merchants, nobles, and popes invested heavily in art and learning, creating an atmosphere where creativity could flourish. The Renaissance marked the emergence of a new worldview, one in which humans were not merely subjects of divine will, but active shapers of their own destiny. Amid this cultural awakening rose some of history's greatest minds, individuals whose brilliance helped reshape the boundaries of what was considered possible. Leonardo da Vinci embodied the Renaissance ideal of the universal man, a painter, inventor, anatomist, engineer, and visionary, whose notebooks overflowed with sketches of helicopters, anatomical diagrams, and studies of light and water. His paintings, such as the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper, became symbols of artistic mastery and psychological depth. Michelangelo, another towering figure, carved marble into living forms and painted the Sistine Chapel ceiling with scenes so grand that they seemed to bridge heaven and earth. Their work represented not only extraordinary talent, but also a shift toward observing the natural world with unprecedented precision. This spirit of inquiry extended beyond art into the sciences, igniting what would later be called the scientific revolution. Astronomers, mathematicians, and physicists began challenging the medieval worldview that had dominated Europe for centuries. Galileo Galilei turned his telescope to the heavens and discovered mountains on the moon, moons orbiting Jupiter, and evidence that the Earth was not the center of the universe. His insistence on observing nature directly rather than relying solely on ancient authorities marked a turning point in scientific thought. Later, Sir Isaac Newton synthesized decades of research into a single framework, formulating the laws of motion and universal gravitation. His work revealed that the same forces governing falling apples controlled the movement of planets, offering a unified explanation of the cosmos. The scientific revolution fundamentally altered humanity's understanding of the natural world, laying the foundations for modern physics, astronomy, and mathematics. The spread of these revolutionary ideas would not have been possible without one of the most transformative inventions in human history, the printing press. When Johannes Gutenberg introduced movable type in Europe during the mid-15th century, he unleashed a communication revolution. Books that once took months to copy by hand could now be produced in vast quantities, making knowledge accessible to merchants, students, craftsmen, and ordinary readers. The printing press accelerated the Renaissance by circulating classical texts, scientific discoveries, and new philosophies across Europe with unprecedented speed. It helped standardize languages, encouraged literacy, and created a growing public eager to engage with fresh ideas. Just as importantly, it weakened the monopoly of information held by religious and political elites, allowing dissenting voices and reformers to reach wide audiences. This expansion of knowledge and questioning spirit soon extended into religion, sparking one of the most profound upheavals in European history, the Reformation. In 1517, Martin Luther challenged the authority of the Catholic Church, criticizing practices such as the sale of indulgences and calling for a return to what he believed were the true teachings of Christianity. His ideas spread rapidly through printed pamphlets, inspiring movements for reform across Germany, Switzerland, England, and beyond. New Christian denominations emerged, each interpreting Scripture in its own way, and Europe plunged into decades of religious conflict, debate, and transformation. The Reformation shattered the religious unity that had defined medieval. The Renaissance and the scientific revolution together marked a decisive turning point in human history, a moment when curiosity, creativity, and the pursuit of knowledge overcame centuries of stagnation. Art reached unparalleled heights, science uncovered the laws of nature, and the printed word empowered ordinary people to question the world around them. These movements did not simply revive the past. They forged a pathway to modernity, reshaping how humanity understood itself and its place in the universe. The early modern world was dominated by vast empires whose power stretched across continents, shaping the lives of millions and transforming global history. Among the most influential were the Ottoman, Mughal, and Qing empires, three great dynasties that stood at the crossroads of cultures, religions, and economies. The Ottomans controlled a territory spanning Southeast Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa, ruling from their magnificent capital, Istanbul. Their empire blended Islamic tradition with administrative flexibility, creating a multicultural society where Arabs, Greeks, Armenians, Slavs, and countless others lived under a single political system. The Ottomans mastered the art of governance through a disciplined bureaucracy and elite Janissary soldiers, while their architectural brilliance transformed cities with mosques, palaces, and markets that reflected a sophisticated urban culture. In South Asia, the Mughal Empire flourished as one of the richest and most artistically vibrant states of the era. Emperors like Akbar, Jahangir, and Shah Jahan presided over a blend of Persian elegance and Indian tradition, encouraging the growth of art, literature, and architecture. The Taj Mahal, shimmering in white marble, became a symbol of Mughal grandeur and cultural fusion. The empire's wealth was fueled by agriculture, textile production, and extensive trade networks that connected India to Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Meanwhile, in East Asia, the Qing dynasty consolidated Chinese territories, expanded into Central Asia, and maintained social order through Confucian principles. The Qing emperors fostered a flourishing of literature, philosophy, and craftsmanship, even as their empire grappled with internal pressures and growing encounters with European powers. While Asia's great empires shaped the eastern half of the world, Europe was undergoing its own transformation. Maritime exploration had given rise to global colonial empires, and countries like Spain, Portugal, Britain, and France rapidly extended their influence across the Americas, Africa, and Asia. Spain amassed enormous wealth from silver mines in the Americas, while Portugal established lucrative trading posts across the Indian Ocean. France and Britain, initially rivals in Europe, soon became rivals across the globe, competing for colonies, trade routes, and political dominance. Their empires were built on exploration, conquest, and economic exploitation, creating a global network that funneled resources back to Europe and reshaped international trade. That challenged centuries of monarchy, privilege, and inequality. Enlightenment thinkers promoted concepts of liberty, equality, and the rights of individuals, spreading a belief that governments should be accountable to the people. These ideas soon ignited revolutionary movements on both sides of the Atlantic. In 1776, the American colonies declared independence from Britain, launching a war that ended with the creation of a new nation founded on Republican ideals. The American Revolution became a symbol of resistance against imperial rule and an early test of Enlightenment principles in action. Only a few years later, France erupted in a revolution far more radical and violent. Economic hardship, social inequality, and resentment toward the monarchy brought millions of ordinary citizens into the streets. The French Revolution toppled the old order, executing King Louis XVI and reshaping France into a republic. Concepts like citizenship, national identity, and universal rights spread rapidly, while terror, war, and political chaos revealed the difficulty of rebuilding society from the ground up. Nevertheless, the revolution transformed Europe, inspiring movements for constitutional government, and fueling debates about freedom, justice, and the role of the state. The Age of Empires and Revolution was a time of extraordinary contrasts, splendor and suffering, expansion and resistance, power and upheaval. Asian empires blended tradition with innovation. European empires stretched across the globe. The Atlantic slave trade reshaped economies and destroyed lives. And revolutionary movements challenged old systems and reimagined political possibilities. Together, these forces propelled the world toward modernity, setting the stage for the industrial, ideological, and global transformations that would soon follow. The Industrial Revolution was one of the most dramatic turning points in human history, a transformation that reshaped economies, societies, and the everyday lives of millions. Beginning in Britain in the late 1700s and spreading across Europe, the United States, and eventually the world, this period marked the shift from traditional handcrafted production to powerful machines, massive factories, and urban industrial centers. Mechanization, factories, and rapid urbanization. Before the Industrial Revolution, most goods were produced by skilled craftsmen or in small family workshops. Production was slow, expensive, and limited. But inventions like the spinning jenny, water frame, and power loom transformed the textile industry. Machines could now spin and weave far faster than human hands. This shift led to the rise of the factory system. Instead of working from home, thousands of workers were brought together under one roof, where machines driven by water or steam power could operate continuously. Factories became the beating heart of industrial economies. As factories expanded, people migrated by the millions from villages to booming industrial cities such as Manchester, Birmingham, and Liverpool. Urbanization was rapid and often chaotic. Overcrowded housing, pollution, long work hours, and harsh living conditions became common. Yet, these cities also became centers of opportunity, attracting businesses, engineers, and workers seeking better wages than rural farming could offer. Steam engines, railways, and the industrial city, the engine that powered this transformation, literally, was the steam engine, perfected by James Watt in the 1770s. No longer reliant on rivers for power, factories could now be built anywhere. Steam engines pumped water from mines, powered textile machinery, and eventually drove locomotives. Railways revolutionized transportation. The 1830 opening of the Liverpool-Manchester Railway demonstrated the power of steam locomotion, fast, reliable, and capable of moving goods and people across great distances. Rail networks expanded rapidly, binding nations together and enabling industrial cities to flourish. The railway boom triggered new industries: iron, steel, coal mining, and mechanical engineering. Industrial cities grew into complex systems with warehouses, docks, power stations, and sprawling residential districts. For the first time in history, entire societies began moving at the speed of machines. Capitalism, labor movements, and social transformation. As industries grew, so did the capitalist economy. Entrepreneurs invested in factories, technology, and labor, seeking profit through mass production. The new economic system encouraged innovation and competition, leading to rapid technological progress. But the benefits were uneven. While owners accumulated vast wealth, factory workers endured long hours, unsafe conditions, and low pay. Children often worked in mines and mills. This sparked the rise of labor movements. Workers formed unions to demand shorter hours, better wages, and safer workplaces. Throughout the 19th century, protests, strikes, and political activism pushed governments to pass reforms like the Factory Acts in Britain, which reduced work hours and banned child labor. Over time, the working class gained political power. influencing democratic reforms and shaping modern labor rights. The age of nationalism and conflict was one of the most turbulent eras in modern history, stretching from the early 1800s to the outbreak of World War I. It was an age defined by rising national identities, powerful political movements, imperial ambitions, and massive wars that reshaped the global order. It began with the Napoleonic Wars, when Napoleon Bonaparte, the self-declared Emperor of the French, attempted to remake Europe according to his vision. Between 1803 and 1815, Napoleon's armies swept across the continent, dismantling old monarchies, spreading revolutionary ideals, and reorganizing territories. His victories disrupted the centuries-old balance of power. Although he was eventually defeated in 1815 at the Battle of Waterloo, the impact of his conquests was permanent. The borders, laws, and political structures of many European regions were dramatically altered. The Congress of Vienna attempted to restore stability by redrawing the map and reinstating monarchies. 4-1. But it could not erase the powerful force Napoleon had awakened: nationalism. People across Europe began identifying not just with a king or a region, but with a nation. An identity shaped by shared language, culture, and historical memory. This rising sense of national unity played a central role in the unification of Germany and Italy. Both regions had long been divided into many small states, duchies, and kingdoms, each with separate rulers and interests. In Germany, unification was driven largely by Prussia under the leadership of Otto von Bismarck. A master strategist, Bismarck used diplomacy and three calculated wars: the Danish War, the Austro-Prussian War, and the Franco-Prussian War, to forge unity among the German states. His goal was to strengthen Prussia and create a powerful German nation-state under Prussian leadership. The decisive defeat of France in 1871 allowed him to proclaim the German Empire in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles. This moment marked the rise of Germany. As a major European power, industrial, militarized, and ambitious, Italy's unification followed a more complex and emotional path, fueled by nationalist leaders like Giuseppe Mazzini, Count Cavour, and the revolutionary hero Giuseppe Garibaldi. Mazzini inspired the idea of a unified Italian republic, while Cavour, the statesman of the Kingdom of Sardinia, maneuvered diplomatically to gain international support. Garibaldi, with his red shirts, led daring campaigns across southern Italy, handing over his conquests to King Victor Emmanuel II to complete the unification. By the 1870s, Italy finally emerged as a single nation, though it struggled with regional differences and economic challenges. Together, the unifications of Germany and Italy dramatically altered the European balance, increasing competition and setting the stage for future conflicts. While nationalism transformed Europe internally, imperialism pushed European powers across continents, especially into Africa and Asia. Driven by industrial needs for raw materials, new markets, and strategic territories, along with a sense of racial superiority and a mission to civilize, European empires expanded aggressively in the late 19th century. The Berlin Conference of 1884-85 formalized the scramble for Africa, allowing European powers to divide the continent with little regard for local communities or historic boundaries. Britain, France, Belgium, Germany, Italy, and Portugal carved out vast territories. Indigenous populations were forced into labor, exploited economically, and subjected to violent rule. In Asia, imperialism took different forms. The British dominated India, the French took Indochina, and the Dutch controlled Indonesia. China faced foreign spheres of influence after a series of unequal treaties, while Japan responded by rapidly industrializing and becoming an imperial power itself. Imperialism not only brought wealth to Europe, but also created deep global inequalities, cultural clashes, and political tensions that would later fuel major conflicts. These tensions reached a breaking point in the early 20th century with the outbreak of World War I. The war was triggered by a complex system of alliances and rivalries among Europe's great powers. Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy formed the Triple Alliance, though Italy later switched sides, while Britain, France, and Russia formed the Triple Entente. National pride, military buildup, and competition for colonies increased hostility. The spark came in June 1914, when Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was assassinated in Sarajevo by a Serbian nationalist. Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, declared war on Serbia. Russia mobilized to protect Serbia. Germany declared war on Russia and France, and Britain joined after Germany invaded Belgium. What should have been a regional conflict exploded into a global war. The battlefield was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Trench warfare defined the Western Front, where soldiers lived in mud-filled trenches, facing machine guns, barbed wire, poison gas, and relentless artillery. Battles such as the Somme, Verdun, and Gallipoli caused millions of casualties without significant territorial gain. The Eastern Front was more fluid, but equally devastating. New technologies, tanks, submarines, aircraft, introduced industrialized killing on a massive scale. By 1918, after years of exhaustion, economic strain, and the entry of the United States, the Allied powers defeated Germany and its partners. The aftermath reshaped the world. The Treaty of Versailles imposed harsh penalties on Germany, redrew borders, and dissolved empires such as Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. Although intended to create lasting peace, the treaty instead sowed resentment and economic hardship, laying the foundation for future instability. The age of nationalism and conflict was a time when new nations rose, empires expanded, and the world was pulled into the First Global War. It was an era defined by both hope for national identity and the devastating consequences of rivalry, ambition, and unchecked power. The world that emerged after the First World War was battered, uncertain, and hungry for stability. Yet instead of peace, the next 3 decades would spiral into even greater turmoil. The interwar years were marked by economic collapse, political extremism, and deep social anxieties that paved the way for new conflicts. The early 1920s offered a brief illusion of recovery, but underneath lay unresolved tensions. Germany was burdened by the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles, facing crushing reparations and political humiliation, while many other nations struggled with debt and rebuilding. When the Great Depression struck in 1929, it shattered the global economy and deepened public despair. Factories closed, banks failed, and millions were left unemployed. Governments grappled with crisis, but their policies often worsened the situation. In this climate of hardship, extremist ideologies gained traction. Fascism, with its promises of national revival and strong leadership, rose dramatically in Italy under Benito Mussolini, and soon after in Germany under Adolf Hitler. Both regimes capitalized on anger, fear, and economic pain, shaping unified yet aggressive nationalist identities. Meanwhile, militarism grew in Japan as it expanded into China and the Pacific, seeking resources and dominance. The world watched uneasily as fascist powers ignored international agreements and tested the boundaries of global tolerance. Hitler rearmed Germany, occupied the Rhineland, annexed Austria, and demanded territory in Czechoslovakia. Western powers, haunted by memories of World War I, pursued appeasement rather than confrontation, hoping diplomacy could prevent another disaster. But the momentum toward war was already building, fueled by ideological rigidity and ambitions for territorial expansion. When Germany invaded Poland on September 1, 1939, Britain and France declared war, marking the beginning of the Second World War, a conflict that would become the most destructive event in human history. World War II expanded rapidly into a global struggle fought on nearly every continent and ocean. In Europe, Germany launched the Blitzkrieg, Lightning War, using fast-moving tanks, aircraft, and infantry to overwhelm Poland, France, the Low Countries, and much of Scandinavia. By 1941, most of Western Europe was under Nazi control, while Britain held out alone under constant bombardment. In Eastern Europe, Hitler broke his pact with the Soviet Union and initiated Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in history. The Eastern Front became a brutal battleground marked by unimaginable suffering and staggering casualties. Meanwhile, in Asia and the Pacific, Japan sought to build an empire, capturing territories from China to Southeast Asia. Its surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941 brought the United States decisively into the war, transforming the conflict into a true global confrontation. Amid these military campaigns, the Holocaust unfolded, the systematic, state-sponsored genocide carried out by Nazi Germany. Jews, along with Romani people, disabled individuals, political dissidents, and others deemed undesirable, were rounded up, imprisoned, and murdered. 6 million Jews were killed, along with millions of others, in concentration camps and extermination centers built for the sole purpose of mass slaughter. The Holocaust exposed the darkest depths of human cruelty and remains one of the most horrific crimes in history. As the war dragged on, momentum shifted against the Axis powers. The Soviet Union held firm at Stalingrad, turning the tide on the Eastern Front. In North Africa and Italy, the Allies gained ground. The D-Day invasion in 1944 opened a new front in Western Europe, allowing Allied forces to push into German territory. In the Pacific, the United States adopted an island-hopping strategy, winning key battles at Midway, Guadalcanal, and the Philippines. By 1945, Germany was collapsing under Allied pressure from both East and West. Hitler committed suicide in his bunker, and Germany surrendered in May. However, the war continued in the Pacific, where Japan refused to capitulate. The United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945, unleashing unprecedented destruction and forcing Japan's surrender. These bombings marked the arrival of nuclear weapons, forever altering the nature of warfare and global security. With World War II over, the world faced the immense task of rebuilding while confronting the political tensions emerging between former allies. The United States and the Soviet Union, though partners in defeating Germany, had fundamentally different ideologies: capitalist democracy versus communist socialism. Their rivalry quickly became the defining feature of the post-war era. Suspicion, competition, and mutual fear fueled what became known as the Cold War. The division of Europe was symbolized by the Iron Curtain, separating Western nations aligned with the United States from Eastern nations dominated by the Soviet Union. Germany itself was split into democratic West Germany and communist East Germany, becoming a physical and ideological battleground. The creation of the United Nations in 1945 was an attempt to prevent another global catastrophe. Formed by dozens of nations determined to maintain peace, improve cooperation, and protect human rights, The UN represented humanity's hope that diplomacy could succeed where earlier efforts had failed. But even with the UN's establishment, the world entered a period of intense geopolitical competition. The US and the Soviet Union raced to expand influence in Europe, Asia, Africa, and Latin America. They avoided direct military conflict, but clashed through proxy wars, espionage, propaganda, and economic pressure. Early Cold War flashpoints included the Berlin blockade, the Greek Civil War, and the Chinese Civil War, which ended with the victory of the Communist Party under Mao Zedong and the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949. Each event widened the ideological divide. Meanwhile, the aftermath of the war accelerated the decline of European empires. Colonized nations in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East pushed for independence, inspired by promises of self-determination and fueled by the weakening of colonial powers. India and Pakistan gained independence from Britain in 1947. Indonesia broke free from Dutch rule, and nationalist movements across Africa began to rise. The world order was shifting from imperial dominance to new sovereign states seeking their own pathways. Technological innovation during and after the war transformed human society at an extraordinary pace. Radar, jet engines, early computers, and nuclear technology emerged from wartime research. The ideological competition of the Cold War further accelerated advancements in rocketry, satellites, and communications, laying the foundation for the space race. At the same time, mass media expanded, shaping public opinion and providing governments with new tools of persuasion and control. The clash between communism and capitalism was fought not only with weapons, but with ideas, culture, and science. The era from the interwar years through World War II and into the early Cold War was one of profound transformation. It reshaped borders, toppled empires, and redefined the meaning of power. The world had marched through depression, dictatorship, genocide, total war, and atomic destruction. And yet out of the devastation emerged new institutions, new nations, and a new global struggle. Humanity had reached both its darkest lows and its most ambitious heights, setting the stage for the complex modern world still unfolding today. The modern era unfolded as a century defined by tension, transformation, and unprecedented connectivity. As the world emerged from the ashes of the Second World War, two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, stood as ideological opposites, shaping global politics through rivalry rather than open conflict. This Cold War became a defining force, a prolonged standoff between capitalism and communism. Each side armed with nuclear weapons capable of destroying the planet many times over. Fear of mutually assured destruction kept the superpowers from direct confrontation, but they battled indirectly through political pressure, economic competition, and proxy wars. Conflicts in Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, and various parts of Latin America became battlegrounds where the two powers clashed by supporting opposing sides. The race between them extended into the skies. The space race became a powerful symbol of national pride and technological superiority. When the Soviet Union launched Sputnik in 1957, the world entered a new era of space exploration and anxiety about what dominance in orbit meant for security. The United States responded with massive investments in science and engineering, culminating in the Apollo missions that placed astronauts on the moon in 1969. This triumph was not only a political victory, but the beginning of humanity's journey beyond Earth, inspiring generations of scientists and dreamers. Meanwhile, nuclear arsenals grew at alarming rates. Every diplomatic misstep carried the danger of escalation, and moments like the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 brought the world frighteningly close to nuclear war before careful negotiation pulled it back from the edge. While the superpowers competed, the global order was shifting beneath their feet as centuries of colonial rule unraveled. Across Africa, Asia, and the Middle East, nations long under European domination demanded independence. Decolonization swept through the world from the late 1940s through the 1970s, fueled by nationalist movements, economic exhaustion in Europe, and changing global attitudes. India and Pakistan's independence from Britain inspired others. Soon, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, Algeria, and dozens more nations reclaimed their sovereignty. In Asia, countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, and Malaysia broke free from their colonial governments, while in the Middle East, states such as Egypt and Jordan carved out new identities after decades of European influence. However, independence often came with challenges: ethnic tensions, border disputes, economic struggles, and Cold War interference, which shaped the political landscapes of these new nations for decades. At the same time, the second half of the 20th century witnessed the rapid expansion of global corporations and the rise of modern technology that connected societies like never before. Multinational companies, ranging from oil giants to electronics manufacturers, grew in scale and power, influencing global markets, politics, and culture. Television became a central feature of life, shaping public opinion and creating shared global experiences. Computers, once room-sized machines, became smaller and more accessible. By the late 20th century, the digital revolution was underway. The emergence of the internet in the 1990s marked a turning point, shrinking distances and allowing information to travel instantly across borders. This technological transformation reshaped economics, communication, entertainment, and even identity, marking the beginning of a new global age. But transformation was not limited to politics and technology. Across many societies, powerful civil rights movements fought to dismantle systems of injustice and inequality. In the United States, African Americans organized massive campaigns for the end of segregation and racial discrimination, led by figures such as Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X. Their efforts not only changed American law, but inspired similar movements around the world. Women, too, pushed for greater equality in education, work, and politics. The feminist movements of the 1960s and 1970s demanded reproductive rights, equal pay, and recognition of women's contributions across all areas of life, reshaping cultural norms and expectations. Social revolutions emerged globally as young people challenged traditional values and embraced new forms of expression, from music to fashion to activism. The anti-war protests of the Vietnam era, the cultural explosion of the 1960s, the rise of environmental awareness, and movements for LGBTQ+ rights transformed societies and expanded ideas of freedom and justice. These pressures forced governments, institutions, and communities to adapt, often reshaping laws and cultural attitudes in profound ways. By the end of the 20th century, the modern era had stitched together a world of contradictions, deep divisions, and astonishing cooperation. Fear of global destruction and hope for human progress. Powerful movements for rights and ongoing struggles for equality. The tensions of the Cold War eventually eased as the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, signaling the end of one global order and the uncertain beginning of another. The world had entered a new age of interconnectedness, shaped by technology, globalization, and the enduring quest for a more just and peaceful future The 21st century opened with a world more connected, ambitious, and vulnerable than ever before. Globalization had woven nations into a single, interdependent system where economies, cultures, and technologies flowed across borders with unprecedented speed. Goods made in one corner of the world were consumed in another. Ideas spread instantly through social media, and geopolitical events in even the smallest countries could ripple outward, affecting global markets and political alliances. Yet this interconnectedness also exposed humanity to new forms of instability. International conflicts evolved beyond traditional battlefields, emerging in the form of cyber attacks, terrorism, economic warfare, and great power competition. Regions like the Middle East, Eastern Europe, and parts of Africa became flashpoints where old rivalries and new political ambitions collided. As nations grappled with these tensions, another threat loomed larger than all others: climate change. Rising temperatures, melting ice caps, extreme weather, and disappearing ecosystems marked a planetary emergency that touched every society. From wildfires and droughts to rising seas and mass migrations, the Earth itself was forcing humanity to confront the consequences of industrial growth and environmental neglect. At the same time, the world was undergoing a digital revolution unlike anything in human history. The internet, once a luxury, became the foundation of global communication, reshaping everything from commerce to education to personal relationships. Billions of people were suddenly connected through phones, computers, and digital networks, forming a global community that existed both in reality and online. Social media platforms amplified voices, sparked movements, spread misinformation, and influenced elections. Meanwhile, artificial intelligence advanced rapidly, from early machine learning algorithms to systems capable of understanding language, diagnosing diseases, and powering autonomous machines. AI became not just a tool, but a transformative force, raising new questions about privacy, creativity, ethics, and the future of work. The digital age blurred the line between human and machine, opening possibilities both inspiring and unsettling. Even as humanity grappled with the digital world, its ambitions turned once again toward the stars. Space exploration entered a new era driven by national agencies, private companies, and international collaboration. The International Space Station became a symbol of global cooperation, hosting astronauts from multiple nations. Robotic missions revealed the mysteries of Mars, comets, asteroids, and the outer planets. Space telescopes peered deeper into the cosmos than ever before, uncovering thousands of exoplanets and suggesting that life might exist beyond Earth. Companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, and others ushered in the age of reusable rockets, lowering the cost of space travel and reviving dreams of colonizing the Moon and Mars. The quest for interplanetary life, whether microbial fossils on Mars or distant civilizations beyond the Milky Way, captured the world's imagination, reminding humanity that its story is part of something far larger than Earth alone. Yet the defining feature of the 21st century is the struggle to balance innovation with responsibility. Humanity faces challenges that transcend borders: pandemics, environmental collapse, resource scarcity, and the ethical dilemmas of emerging technologies. At the same time, extraordinary progress in medicine, renewable energy, communication, and science continues to push civilization forward. The century is a testament to human resilience, how societies adapt, recover, and create even in the face of uncertainty. It is a reminder that the story of humanity is still unfolding, driven by survival, curiosity, and the eternal desire to explore the unknown.